Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about P6-Loader and how it can make your use of P6 easier and faster. Just a couple things before we start. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the questions box on the side of your screen, and we'll try and answer them as we go. But if we can't answer them as we go, we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. My name's Ian Nicholson. I'm based in Calgary. I've got a number of years of experience working all over the world. I do a lot of work in the risk and turnaround side of the business and have worked with a number of different systems and how to integrate those systems to P6. Joining me today is Sue Familia, who's from our Wyoming office. Sue also has many years of project management experience. She works a lot in turnarounds, IT and capital programs with a number of our clients. So let's talk a little bit about why we developed P6-Loader. We've been working with P6 since the first days of it. In fact, we did the first implementation of P6 in Canada back in 1999. And we always hear the same thing, not only from our clients, but from our implementation people. And it's always the same struggles that people have. The first one is administering P6 can be a real pain. And the reason for that is it's not easy to move things around within the administration modules of P6. In the latest releases, they've allowed you to at least use one profile to create another profile when you're adding users, but there's a lot more to P6 administration than just users. You need to manage your EPS and OBS hierarchies. You need to manage your security profiles. You need to be able to move things from one database to another. We have one client who creates a new database for each new customer that they have. And so they've got many databases that they work with. And every time they create a new database, they need to recreate all their security profiles. They need to recreate all their layouts and all their reports and everything else. And with P6-Loader, you can do all of that. The other thing we hear about a lot is people complain about being able to develop projects within P6. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, when P6 first came out, they had this cute little tool called the Size and Complexity Wizard. And the idea was that you could make a template project and answer a few questions, and based on the structure that you've defined, it would automatically scale up or scale down the project. Now, it wasn't perfect. In fact, it probably wasn't even great, but it was a good idea. But they discontinued it after a few years. And so people always struggle with the idea of how to get my template projects into the system. How do I get how do I create new projects? How do I manage the projects when I create them? How do I scale them up or down? All those kind of things. And rather than going into P6 every single time and editing every activity in a 1,000 activity schedule, you can use P6-Loader to very quickly change the coding structures, change the durations, change the logic, do all those kind of things based on your templates. The next thing people struggle with is data integration. Now, it can be really difficult to get information in and out of P6. Now, getting it out is fairly easy. You can just dump it into a CSV file from a report, but those CSV files are often problematic in that the formatting is all screwed up and you spend a bunch of time trying to fix it because you had a few commas in your descriptions, et cetera, et cetera. And the reality is that a lot of times what people want to do is they want to figure out how their data integration is going to work. So let's say I've got a computerized maintenance management system, CMMS, and I want to take work orders and I want to put them into P6. Well, I want to try that a few times. I want to play around with it, make sure I get the process right before I sit down and do some hard coding of an interface. Well, with P6-Loader, you can take all of that information, pull it into Excel, and then load it into P6. So you can move your work orders easily. You can make changes very easily, make sure things are working. And when things are working properly, you can just continue to use P6-Loader forever, or you could then use that as the basis to write a permanent integration program. The next thing is team engagement. Well, what do we mean by team engagement? Well, Sue and I have both worked with P6 for decades. But so for us, it's kind of second nature. And what we forget a lot of times is that Somebody new to P6 can have a very steep learning curve. And if somebody only uses it occasionally, like once a month to do updates, they'll often forget what they have to do. Um, or if they're out of it for a year, they'll have to relearn everything when they come back in. And that's very frustrating for the sort of casual user. So one of the things that P6 Loader will allow you to do is to just use Excel for doing those updates. So email out a list of the activities that somebody needs to update in Excel. They update them in Excel, you bring it back, load it up, you're done. So people don't have to use P6's interface or web interface to do their updates. They can just basically use Excel, which is a tool most people use at least once a week. The next one is consistent portfolios. So oftentimes people decide they want to leverage all that great information in P6 using a tool like Tableau or Power BI or something like that. But the problem is you need to be able to set up some consistent portfolios within P6 so that you can actually slice and dice the information. So to do that, we need to have we may need to change our EPS structure. We might need to change our project codes. We might need to add some user defined fields or activity codes or any of those kind of things. And that's really difficult in P6 after you've already finished a project. You got to go back into every single project and reassign all of this stuff. You got to detach the baseline so you can assign the codes to them. It's a real chore. With P6 Loader, you can just go and apply all of that directly from Excel, which makes things very, very easy and very seamless. So let's talk a little bit about how it works. So first of all, we have options as to how you deploy P6 Loader. The classic example is it's on-premise, which means that both P6 and P6 Loader are within your company's data center or your site trailer if it's small. And you basically just everything's right beside each other, everything works seamlessly. But what we're starting to see is more people are actually moving to more of a hybrid model where maybe they've got Office in one cloud, and they've got P6 in another cloud, and they've got P6 Loader on site, or any combination of the above, where some things are in the cloud, some things are on site. Well, P6 Loader supports that as well. And maybe everything's in the cloud, but it's in different clouds. And again, we support that because we use the Primavera web services to do the integration. So everything can be moved quite seamlessly from one location to another. Now, let's talk a little bit about the technological approach. So let's talk a little bit about the history maybe of where P6 integration has come from. So the first thing that people used to do is when P6 came out, people realized very quickly that they had this XER file, which you can move projects from one database to another, and it's simply a text file. So people started to manipulate those XER files. Well, there's a few challenges when you do that. So and if we look at our requirements here, the first one is we want to be able to access global data. We want to be able to use P6 security so that people who don't have access rights can't mess things up. We want to validate the data to make sure that we don't put corrupt data into our system. We want it to be supported by Oracle. So if something goes wrong, we can get on with Oracle support and they'll help us. We want to be able to selectively extract what we want. So in other words, if we want to update activity codes, we don't want to extract an entire project. We just want to extract the activity code assignments. And finally, we want multi-project capability. So we want to be able to work with multiple projects at the same time. So I want to pull a project and its baselines, or I want to pull two different projects. So going back to the XERs, because it was designed just to move projects from one database to another, it doesn't access global data. It doesn't look at P6 security. There's no data validation within there because Primavera's assumption originally was that nobody would manipulate these things. If you do manipulate it and you break something, it's not supported by Oracle. Now, we had a client where someone made a mistake in manipulating an XER and they tried to make an EPS code into a global code and they spelt the word global incorrectly. Somebody just fat fingered it. Well, it imported fine, but then whenever someone would try and log into the database, it would immediately crash because when P6 loads, it reads all of your activity code dictionaries. So it would read that dictionary, come across a value it didn't understand, and it would just shut down. So any users that logged into the system after this import immediately got kicked out again. And it took us a couple of, well, I wouldn't say a couple of days, it took us about a day to figure out what had happened and fix the problem. Um, so you want to make sure if something like that happens, Oracle's going to support you, and they won't if you're manipulating XCRs. The next one is you want to have the selective extraction. You want to just look at certain areas, not bring an entire project out, which you can't do. The one thing you can do with an XCR is you can export and import multiple projects at a time. You can't, however, export and import baselines. So the next thing that Primavera came up with was this thing called the SDK. So the SDK stood for Software Developers Kit, and the idea was it was basically an ODBC connection that would allow you to interact with the Primavera database. And it was good in that it allowed you access global data. The data was validated, and it did allow you selective extraction in multiple projects. However, you had to be an admin super user to use it, which meant there was no security at all. The other issue was that Oracle no longer supports the SDK and has not applied any fixes to it for about 10 years. So why is that? Well, it's because they came out with the API and web services, which are much more modern technologies than what we use today with P6-Loader. There is a built-in P6XL import and export within P6. However, it does not access global data. Again, you have to be a project super user to use it, so there's no security around it. It does validate the data. It is supported by Oracle, and it does allow selective extraction, but it only allows you to do one project at a time. So it's not terrible, but it's not great, and it's fairly slow. Finally, Primavera came out with the idea of an XML import, and the idea there was to improve on the functionality of the XCR files. And it is better. It is supported by Oracle. However, if you manipulate it, they're not going to support it. It does have data validation as well. However, it's single project only, so it's very limited. And again, it doesn't allow you to access global data. So P6-Loader lets you do all of these things. We use the latest technology from Oracle, so it is supported by Oracle. It does data validation. Whatever P6 security you have under your user profile is also what you're going to get in P6. So if I can't access a project in P6 client, I can't access it through the P6-Loader either. Global data is covered, and you can selectively extract and upload as few or as much data as you need to, including multiple projects and baselines. So we talk about subject areas in P6-Loader. We have our global subject areas. We have our resource and role subject areas. We have our project and activity subject areas, and we have utilities. So there's lots of different things that we do in here, and I'm not going to go through the whole list. You can certainly read it yourself. But we access all of the global information, all of the resources and roles, all the high-level project information, all of the detailed activity information. And we also have utilities in there to help you manage the system. Like we let you roll down activity codes and calendars. We let you move layouts and reports from one database to another. We let you back up the entire database if you want. You can read and write XCRs and XML files, and you can run job services. So if you want to do a load and then reschedule the project, you can do so. And one of our large clients does that. They do a very large data load on the weekends, and then every project gets rescheduled after it's finished loading. So those are all things that you can do within P6-Loader. So how does it work? Well, what we do is you extract the information that you want to work with, be it global, user, or project-specific data. You can extract projects, as I said, one project or many projects. You can extract the baselines. You can extract the resources. You can do whatever you need to do with that data. You can go in and just run some smart filters in Excel and do some updates, or you can run macros in Excel, or you can pull data from another system into Excel and then load it back up, and you're good to go. So let's take a look. I'm going to hand it over to Sue, and Sue can actually show you how the system works.
Okay, thank you, Ann. So I'm going to just share my screen so that we can see this live. Okay, so what I have here is the login screen basically for P6-Loader. It is accessed through a URL. And we can point it to several different databases. So if you have multiple databases in your environment, we could point P6-Loader to each one of those. And just like P6, you would choose the one that you want and then log in using your P6 credentials. Now, when we come in to P6-Loader, we have some areas over here on the left, and I'm going to visit a few of them. However, because there is so much in here, I'm not going to be able to visit all of them, but I will do the high points basically and show you a few things. First of all, I want to go into the extract area, which is where you would extract data from P6. So I was playing around here, so I had some things that were already done, and I want to take those off. And that is clear all. There we go. Okay, so what we have in our modules is that we have different subject areas, as Ian spoke about. If you are able, you can work with any type of user information, including security profiles, the users themselves, and their resource access. We have global information, which is going to be any of your global pieces of data, including codes and user-defined fields, as well as calendars, EPS, OBS. In the way of roles and resources, we can access just about everything on roles and resources, meaning even units of measure. We can do curves, resource codes, everything in that area. If you do use risk, we can handle some of the risk areas there. I'm going to come back to usage. Now, we have project information, which is going to be anything to do with your project at that project level. Your WBS is here, as well as if you want to work with your baselines. Now, in the area of our activities, that's going to be anything that has to do within your project with activities, relationships, resource assignments, expenses, steps, etc. So we are able to access approximately, I don't know, about 99% of the information. So we can grab a lot of it because we go through that API, and anything that's available through the API, we're able to access with P6-Loader. Now, if I were wanting to pull something out, let's say I wanted to work with my OBS and EPS. I'm just going to go up to the top here. I would select those modules that I want to pull out. In the case of projects, those are on the right-hand side. And so it's essentially your EPS nodes that you are looking at here. So you can drill down, you can go to, until you have your projects that are here. It's going to tell you if they're active, what kind of status they're on. Now with global data, and to select them, I guess you just use your little check mark here. So you could do one, multiple, however many you want to, work with as many projects as you want to. Now, with global data such as OBS and EPS, I don't need to have a project associated with it, so I don't need to actually select a project. So I'm just going to pull out the OBS and EPS so we can kind of see what these look like, what these sheets look like when we extract from with P6-Loader. So P6-Loader is going out and it's getting my EPS and OBS structures for me. I download that, and that's going to import or going to open that in Excel for me. So what I can do here is kind of explain what all of these colors and things mean when I extract data with P6. First of all, I have two tabs, one for my OBS, one for my EPS. So each module is going to come out in its own tab. And when I'm talking about the columns and their colors, essentially the red background columns are columns that are mandatory for you to work with this particular module. So for my EPS, I need to have an EPS ID, an EPS name, and an OBS ID associated with it. Now, if I wanted to remap my ID for my EPS, the orange columns are going to give you that ability here. Because it's actually keying on ID, it can't just go, you can't just change it because it can't find it to the first time. So what I would do is I would put my new ID in here. Let's say I wanted it to be, oh, try that again. I want it to be just EAI tools. I could put that here. I would save this, and then when I loaded it back in, it's going to go out and change this one EAI tools to EAI tools. So it's going to allow me to remap that mandatory piece of information. Now, if I'm not doing any remapping and I don't want this column there, it's kind of in the way, I can simply delete it. As long as you're not doing any type of change in that column, you can delete it from your sheet. Now, the same goes with anything that is blue. Blue is data that you can actually edit, add, change, whatever with P6-Loader. Now, if I weren't working with these, again, this is a case where I can just remove these columns because I don't need to change anything in there. Now, I also have gray columns. With gray columns, these are indicating that these are informational only. So what these have done is it's pulled out some information on this row. So for my top EPS, and it's telling me when it was created, when it was last updated. Again, gray columns can be deleted. Maybe you just needed to refer to them, and that's it. Now, in some cases, when we have summary data that is available on a particular module, we have pulled out summary data for you as well. Now, with summary data, this is data that you can't change, but sometimes you want to refer to it when you are pulling out, let's say in this case, an EPS node, and you want to see some summary data there. These gray columns are also going to do that for you. So in a nutshell, that is what all the colors and different columns and things mean in P6-Loader. Now, I want to go back and talk a little bit about our utilities that we have available. Now, we have the ability to pull out usage sheets for this data that is underneath my usage module here. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to take, in the case of this first one, it's going to look at all the UDF codes that are out in my database. And if I click particular projects, it's going to give me projects for, it's going to tell me the usage for UDFs on that particular project or projects. It's going to tell me how many times it was used, as well as where it was used, in what project. So it's easy for me to go out and analyze my data, perhaps in my whole database. Maybe there's some cleanup that needs to be done. It's been there for a while, and maybe we don't have projects that are using some of these data elements anymore. We can actually go and analyze that. Now, some other ones that we have are the ability to roll down activity codes from one level to another. Now, in P6, we can roll them up, but we cannot roll them down. With P6-Loader, you can roll them down. So if you were cleaning up and needed to move around some codes, you could do that. We also have the ability to merge UDFs as well. So I'm going to take a look at the activity roll down. So when I go and I'm looking at this project that I have here, I can see that I've got kind of a mess going on. I have a phase code that's at the global level, but it really, it doesn't need to be there. I would actually rather it be an EPS level activity code because it only pertains to a group of my projects under a certain EPS. I also have 2 different equipment IDs. So with my equipment, these are at 2 different levels, but they are the same list. So I want to combine these. And again, this is something that's going to be important to some projects under a particular EPS. So I want that combined code to be associated with that EPS. Now, in the way of specs, these again are duplicated. And so on duplication, I want to combine these and combine the dictionaries together. And then I want to actually push this to the project level because it's only important to my project. And I also have work orders that are at global, and these are, I want to roll down to my project level. So the way I would do that with our code roll down utility is that I would put the definition of my original code. So I'm going to put the scope as well as the name. Now with the phase code, I want to roll it down to the EPS level. And I also want to give it a new name when I roll it down so that it's more identifiable. And then I want to, of course, define where that EPS, what EPS it's going to be associated with. Now, in the way of my equipment, again, I've defined what they are now, what scope and what name they are now. I'm going to say I want to put those at my EPS level, and I'm going to name them the same name so that when P6-Loader combines them, it will put them under that one name, and then it will reassign them in all of my projects, so I don't have to redo that. And then I have my EPS ID that I wanted associated with. In the way of specs, same thing. I've got my 2 that I want to combine. I'm going to put them at the project level, and I'm going to name them the same thing. Of course, because this is a project code, I'm going to need to define the project that I want it associated with. And with with the P6L work order, this I just want to roll down to my project level, and I don't really want to change the name on this one. So I'm just going to keep that roll down name blank, and it will roll down with the original name and put it to the project, tell it what project I want it to. And then finally, on this last column, this is where I'm going to be able to determine what I want to do with that original code. Do I want to keep it or do I want to delete it? So in the case of these first 5 here, I want to analyze those some more. Make sure that everything has been, reassigned, that there aren't other projects or EPS that are using this code, and just be sure before I delete them that everything's good. Now, with my work order, I know this is the only work order one out there. It only belongs to this project. And so I'm going to go ahead and delete it at the same time that I roll down that work order to the project level. So what I would do is I would go to P6-Loader. I would save that, obviously, and I would go to my upload area. In my upload area, I would go and I would grab my file that we just looked at, and I would tell P6-Loader to upload it. P6-Loader is going to go out. It's going to combine those ones that need to be combined, reassign them in those activities, and it's going to rename them and push them down. Once it's finished, I can go back to P6 and I can do an F5 to refresh the data because P6-Loader does hit the tables. And so I need to refresh that. Now you can see those old ones are gone. So I'm going to have to go and add what I rolled down. So at my EPS, I have my equipment and I have my new phase. Now in my project, here are my specs as well as my work order. And if I take a look at my global area, I can see that I don't have my P6L work order there anymore. It was removed. But those other ones, like my specs here and my phase, those were maintained. So I can do some further analysis on those. Now, when I say, okay, that's going to bring in those newly rolled down and combined codes, and I can see that they've all been reassigned in my project. So really great utilities that will help you work with your data in P6. Now, another thing that Ian talked about is that perhaps we want to develop a new project, and I need everything for this project. Not only do I need WBS and activities, but I also need to develop some resources here. So I've got some resources that I need to add for this project, and I'm just going to go ahead and open that new project that's blank. And I also need to just basically build out everything on my project. I have no WBS, I have no activities, nothing in there. So I have a pretty big load that I've prepared for this. But keep in mind, you don't have to do this all at once. If all you have when you're starting to build out your project is your WBS, you can just load the WBS. But in my case, I have everything. I know everything that I need to create, and I'm going to do that in one load. So on your WBS, you have the ability to nest it. So you have parent and child relationships. You just say which parent you want a particular WBS node to be under. You can give it OBS IDs. You can set your earned value computations, everything you would need for your WBS structure. Now, for this particular project, I need to create some project level activity codes. So I'm going to create the names here and define everything about it. And then I'm going to go and I have another sheet that's going to populate my dictionary. So my discipline values are in blue, my area values are in green, and my work package values are in purple. So this is going to create and define my dictionary for these activity codes. Now for my activities, I'm going to define, first of all, what project, because you can work with more than one project. And then I'm going to define my ID. I'm going to say which WBS I want it in, name it, and I can also assign project codes, global codes, project UDFs, whatever I need to at this activity level. Now, in this case, I have used the functionality of Excel to help me build out some of my activity names. So you can see I've used a concatenate and put it uppercase here. Now, in order to do that, I needed to add an additional column that had a title in it. Now, I can do that with P6-Loader because P6-Loader does not recognize the title as a column header. So when it reads in this information, it's simply going to skip over that column and not do anything with this data. But I could still use it in my formula. And so I don't have to worry about that extra column being there. It's also using my area and my work package to build it out. Another thing I don't have to do is change my formula to actual values. P6-Loader is going to take the result of that formula and load it, and not the formula that you have defined. I can set up some expenses on my activities, and perhaps in conjunction with that, I need to build out some cost accounts. So I'm going to build out some cost accounts for my project. I'm going to add some steps to some of my activities. And again, you could use the functionality in Excel to help you out. Let's say I have these steps that are consistent with several of my activities. I can take those, I can then paste in my activity ID, and it's going to create those for me. So the copy and paste works wonders in here. Now, I do need to have a special resource calendar for this project. And it is a 10 by 4 rotating calendar, 10 off, 10 on, 4 off. So 3 areas for a calendar. First, you're going to create the calendar and define those hours per day, month, week, etc. Then I can define work time for my calendar. So it's simply marking X's where you want to have work time appear and defining the day of week. And then I have my exceptions. Now, in some cases, exceptions aren't a big deal. However, in this rotating calendar, if you were to build this in P6 itself, you would need to count and click boxes and then say non-work time, and then hope you counted the next 10 days accurately, and then do the next 4 days and off. So if you've ever had to do this, it's pretty cumbersome. And if you make a mistake, it is a nightmare to try to go back and fix it. So with P6-Loader, I can use, again, that functionality within Excel. So I'm going to put my first date that's off, and then I'm going to use a formula to calculate my next 4 days. Now, when I come to my next set of days off, I can again use a formula and then calculate my next 4 days. So this is going to be a lot more accurate and a lot easier because I can drag down those formulas and things like that to identify my exceptions in my calendar. I do need to create a resource code. So I'm going to create that and populate the dictionary. I have then, I need to bring in some resources. So I've got my resources defined. I've even identified some roles for those resources. I'm going to assign that calendar that I just showed you that I am creating. And I'm going to assign my codes for these resources. Now with P6-Loader, if I am creating something on a different sheet in the same load, P6-Loader knows the order in which to load the data so that you're successful. It knows it needs to create that calendar before it can assign it. So I don't have to worry about loading my calendar, then coming back and loading my resources because now the calendar is created. It knows that it needs to create it first. And so I am ready. Oh, I guess I need to do some resource assigning. So then I'm ready to assign my resources. I'm even going to do some planning here for my resources on each one of my activities. And then I'm going to create my logic through my project. So I define the project ID and the activity ID for the predecessor and the successor. Now, what this allows me to do is that if I do have any cross-project relationships, I can define these here in this sheet. So if you import contractors' projects and you tie that project, that imported project into your main project, maybe through milestones or something, you can create these assignments, and every time you import a new project, you can recreate those cross-project relationships very easily. Now I can also, I'm actually going to get my type of relationship, and I could even add some lag in there if needed. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to upload this entire project that I've developed. So I'm going to grab that file and I'm going to upload. P6-Loader is going to go in, it's going to create that data that I defined, and it's going to make it available. And when it's finished, I'm going to be able to go into P6 and refresh my data. And I'm going to see all of my new project information, including my resources and my calendars and everything else I set up. there. So I'm just going to go to resources first, and I'm going to refresh my data. And I can see all of my new resources in here. Let's see, I think I come down to here. These are all my new resources. I have my new calendar here as well. And all of my codes and things are also assigned on these. Now in my activities, I've got my calendars assigned. I've got my activities created. They're under the correct WBS. I had my durations, my steps, my logic, my resources and roles. I even had some cost IDs that came in here. And here's my planning that I did on that load. So developing projects is very quick and easy, especially if you're having your data provided from team members in an Excel sheet already. Now, we also talked about working with baselines. So with P6-Loader, you can work with a baseline without having to detach it, or you don't have to use the kind of sometimes cumbersome update baseline functionality in P6. So I've got a project here that I have created a baseline on, and I have some found work that I need to add in, as well as I have found that I need to debit and credit some of my units and costs in my baseline file. So the way that I do that is that I would pull out the activities for my baseline and my project. And you can see that I've got, if I scroll up here, I've got my project ID with that B1. That's indicating, of course, that's my first baseline. Now on my added work, not only do I want to add that to my baseline, but I also want to add that to my project. So I can do that at the same time, just by designating what my project ID is. So I'm going to go ahead and add this TA1530 ID, activity ID, and I'm going to, I'm not going to put any costs or labor units or anything like that into it. Now, in the case of these yellow highlighted activities, I need to debit and credit $90 between two of them, $180 between the other two, and I also need to adjust my labor units in there as well. Now, when I pulled this out with P6Loader, I extracted these. This column was actually, this column was my original amount that I pulled out. I added a column so that I could put my debit and my credit in there. And then I've used P6Loader or Excel functionality to sum this for me. And I'm now going to reload that back into my planned labor cost and my planned labor units. Now, I don't have to reload all of these ones that I'm not changing. So what I could do is I could go out and I could filter, and I could say, I only want to load these. Now, if you don't actually remove them from the sheet, they will get loaded. So you do have to actually delete them. But this is just an example of what the sheet would look like if I deleted everything else that I was not changing. So I'm going to load this, this baseline here. So again, go to upload, get my baseline, and upload my changes to my baseline and my additional work. Now going back to P6, I'm going to update my data. And my changes have come through. Here's my added work. And I can see where I debited and credited. Oh, and I hate when it does that. Debited and credited my activities, and they've been adjusted on my baseline. Now, finally, what I might want to do or what I do want to show you is that you can do updating with P6-Loader. So not always do we have all of our users or all of our people providing updates in P6. They don't necessarily use P6 when they're updating. So what we can do is we can provide for them an easy way to put their updates on an Excel sheet and send them back to us. Now, what I've done here with P6-Loader is in my extract, I have the ability to actually define what's going to be coming out on each one of my sheets. So I have a little pencil beside each one of these sheets that's going to allow me to pick and choose the columns that I want to have come out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first blank out what I had because I don't want anything residual coming in. And I actually do this frequently. So I have created a definition. Now, a definition is something where I have defined what I want to pull out, what columns I want to pull out, and perhaps, if it's applicable, the projects I want to work with. So I can save that, go back and use it every time. So I don't have to rebuild this each time. In this case, I want to do an update on these two projects. So I'm going to go ahead and select that and say load. And I can see that I've had some things applied. So I now have my activity sheet that's enabled. And if I go into my customized columns, I can see that I have on the left are the columns that are not going to be pulled out. And on the right are the columns that I do want to pull out when I extract data. Now, I don't need any user-defined fields, nor do I need any codes. So if I wanted to move, if I wanted to have a code that came out, I would, of course, have it over on the right-hand side. But in my case, I don't need that. The same would go for my user-defined fields. And then I would save it. Now, if I had changed something and I wanted to resave it, I could certainly go back in and I could save as, or I could just save over the top of the current definition that I have assigned there. Now, I also have the two projects that I want to update already checkmarked as well. So that's all part of my definition. So now when I go to extract, it would be very easy for me. I could go out, I could apply that definition, and then simply extract because it already has everything set up that I want to bring out. Now, when I download this is something that I'm going to be able to share with my users that need to update my projects. So I just need some very basic things when I update. I just need to have, the status, the percent complete, an actual start, an actual finish, and if needed, suspend and resume dates. So if I did have, let's say, activity codes that designated what area that this update would need to go to, I could actually pull out those codes. I could filter to the ones that need to be updated for a particular area, and then just provide them those activities that they needed. But mine's a simple project, and so I could send this out to my users and have them update. Now, I've gotten that back, and so I've got some progress in there. I can see that my two milestones are completed, and I have two activities that are in progress. And I've got my start dates for each one of those activities. Now, another thing that we can do is that we can actually put in units, costs, what have you, in different buckets. So in my case, this update crossed over 2 months of my project. And so I want to keep that financial data separated into those 2 months. So on my earthworks here, I have data, or I have work that was done in both May and June. And on my other activity in my second project, I have work that was done by all 3 of my resources in June. So I can also import this. So I'm going to go ahead and import this file, and let's see what it did to update my project. All right, now I can go back and I can refresh. Okay, I have my completed activities and I have my in progress activities and my not started activities. Pull this down just a little bit. Now in my progressed activities, I have everything that was updated, including my actuals. And in the case of those buckets that I put in my units that I loaded for each one of my months, here is my May and my June for my first project that I only had earthworks on. And then for my second project in the month of June, I have all 3 of my resources that have actual units in June. So we can handle spreads and financial periods and everything like that for units, costs, whatever's needed. Now, because I have just a minute, I am going to just talk about a few things that we can do in P6-Loader as well. So we have the ability to extract XML files. So we can go out and actually grab a file and decide if we, what we want to bring out with that XML, whether it's a single XML or a zip, and then we could choose what projects we want in that XML. We can also convert XMLs and XCRs. So if you already have an XCR or XML, you can convert it into a P6-Loader file or a workbook so that you can see all of the data that's in that XCR. We have this layout area, and what this is used for is if you are going moving layouts from one database to another database. You can't just export them and import them in because the table numbers are different between databases. This allows you to convert those layouts from one database to another and fixes them up so that they work again. And then finally, we have kind of some fairly new functionality, but we have the ability to do backup jobs automatically with P6-Loader. So essentially, we can go in and we can define when we want to export either XML and or XCR or Excel files for in your P6. You can choose what you want to export. So in this case, we export our active activities or active projects. If we wanted to do something weekly, we could assign that weekly, and we could go out and maybe we want to back up, our what ifs, our inactive, our templates, we could do that as well. So we do have the ability that we can automate that. And then for each one, you can see each day I have my backups that are running. This is going to allow me to download a zip file of those projects in either XML or XCR, Excel form. And then I could restore one project if I needed to. I could find the global data that maybe got missed or deleted or anything like that. So this has become kind of a lifesaver. We've had 2 instances where we've had clients that actually needed this type of data, and we were able to restore their projects and their data for them. So it looks like we don't have any questions at this point. So I'm going to hand this back to Ian so that he can wrap up.
Thanks, Sue. Okay. So just a few customer comments to wrap things up. We like to get feedback from our customers about people who are using P6-Loader. So there's a few comments here. What we generally find is that people start off by buying P6-Loader for a specific need, and then they end up using it for more and more things just to make their lives easier. So it's kind of a, there's one key requirement that drives the purchase of P6-Loader, but then people find all kinds of uses for it. One I particularly like is this client who said she wished she'd done this a couple of years ago. This is from a client that hummed and hawed about buying P6-Loader for years and finally purchased it and now uses it all the time. We've got clients all over the world using P6-Loader. Some are in the energy industry, some are in the transportation industry, some are in the engineering industry. So all kinds of different companies that use P6-Loader. And we can help you with other things as well. So in addition to P6-Loader, we have other tools that we provide. You can see them on our website. Lots of tools for Primavera and for other systems. We do training and implementation of Primavera products as well. And we've been a Primavera solution provider since 1995. As I mentioned before, we've been working with P6 since 1999, or as it was P6, I think it was called Primavera Enterprise way back then. And we've been an Oracle Platinum partner since 2009. We've got team members in various places around the world. And we've got a lot of experience in different industries and a lot of add-ons. As I said, you can see those other add-ons on our site. So if there are any questions, feel free to answer them now. We're just got about 2 minutes left. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the questions section. Okay, there's a question here in the chat saying, how much is P6-Loader? Well, we have 4 different tiers depending on your requirements. So what I'd suggest is that to get some pricing, I suggest you reach out to Sue. Sue's contact information is here on the screen. And then she can figure out which package would be appropriate for you. So depending on your usage and your requirements, we have different levels of P6-Loader available. So Sue's contact information is there on the screen. Feel free to reach out to her and she can respond to that. Okay, so if there aren't any other questions, we'll wrap it up here. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Hope this has piqued your interest in P6-Loader, and we hope to hear from you soon. Thanks again.